When my uncle left me his lavish beach house, I quietly placed it in a trust. A week later, my parents showed up smirking and said, "We had the deed transferred. You're out by Friday." I just smiled. 2 days later, they came back with buyers and went pale when my lawyer walked out holding the documents. They always treated me like I was invisible, a silent footnote in their grand family story. But when my uncle left me $1 million beach house, their true colors bled through, and what they tried to do next, well, that wasn't just betrayal. That was war. My name's Jake, and for most of my 27 years, I was the quiet one. The one who kept his head down, went along with things, never caused a fuss. My parents had these massive personalities, and my older brother, he just thrived on their attention. Me? I learned pretty early on it was just easier to stay out of the way. It wasn't like they outright mistreated me, but I always felt tolerated. Like I didn't quite measure up. But there was one person who truly saw me, truly got me, my Uncle Rob. He was my dad's younger brother, a total opposite, laid back, funny, and he always knew when I needed someone to talk to. He lived out by the coast in this incredible old beach house, a place that had been his for decades. Summers there were pure magic. While my parents were always caught up in work or my brother's latest achievements, Uncle Rob would take me fishing, teach me to surf, or we'd just sit on the deck, watching the sunset, talking about everything and nothing. Even when I got older, through college, struggling with odd jobs, feeling lost, he never made me feel like I wasn't enough. He believed in me in a way my parents never could. So when he passed away suddenly, it ripped a hole right through me. Losing him felt like losing the only person in my family who had ever truly been in my corner. But what I never saw coming was the bombshell he dropped next. At the reading of his will, turns out Uncle Rob had left me, his entire beach house. Not my parents, not my brother. Me. A place worth over $1 million. For the first time in my life, I had something that was truly mine, not because I'd fought tooth and nail for it, but because someone I loved trusted me enough to just give it. My parents' reaction in that meeting should have been a screaming red flag. They smiled, congratulated me in front of the lawyer, but there was this flicker in their eyes. Something sharp, something calculating. Like they were already figuring out how to make it theirs. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was imagining things, that they were just surprised. But that sickening knot in my gut wouldn't loosen. Just a few days later, my mom called. That sickly sweet tone she always used when she wanted something. She asked if I'd thought about what I was going to do with the place. I told her honestly I wasn't sure yet, I needed time. That's when she started. "Well, houses like that are so hard to manage, honey. Wouldn't it be better if we just handled it for you?" I laughed it off, thinking it was just her usual overstepping. But when I hung up, my stomach twisted. That was the first hint. The first whiff of disrespect. A quiet voice inside me, all those years of being overshadowed, told me, "Be careful." Uncle Rob hadn't just left me a house. He'd left me something that could change my entire life. I wasn't about to let anyone take it away. And then, a week later, they showed up. Not for a visit. Not to reminisce. They strode into the beach house with these smug, almost triumphant looks on their faces. My dad had a folder, my mom was grinning like she'd won the lottery. And then he said it. The words that made my blood run cold, "We had the deed transferred. You're out by Friday." I just sat there, stunned. Staring. The confidence in their voices, the absolute certainty, the way they looked at me like I was some kid who had no say at all. For a split second, I was 10 years old again, being told what to do, feeling utterly powerless. But then, something snapped. I was 27. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about the house. This was about years of them dismissing me, overlooking me, deciding for me. And for the first time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I smiled. Just a small one. And for the first time in my life, they didn't seem so sure of themselves. I didn't argue. That's what really threw them off. My dad had a whole speech ready. I could see it in the way he squared his shoulders. My mom was poised to lecture. But I didn't say a word. I just leaned back in the kitchen chair, folded my arms, and gave them that small smile again. "Jake," my dad finally said, a hint of impatience breaking through his calm facade. This is what's best for the family. You don't know the first thing about maintaining a property like this. Insurance, taxes, renovations. Your mother and I can handle it. We've already started the paperwork. Buyers are lined up. You'll get something out of it, too. The way he said it, like tossing scraps to a dog. My chest burned, but I forced my voice to stay steady. I'll think about it, I told him, standing up, ushering them toward the door. As my mom passed, she touched my arm, her voice sickeningly sweet again. Don't take this the wrong way, honey. It's not that we don't trust you. It's just, you've never been responsible with big things. Remember when you sold your old car for half of what it was worth? Or when you dropped out of grad school? This is too important for you to mess up. Every word was a reminder. A mental scoreboard of my so-called failures. Never mind I'd been working 2 jobs back then, barely keeping afloat, while they were bailing my brother out of his 5th failed business. When they finally left, their words hung heavy in the air. For years, I'd believed those criticisms. Believed maybe they were right about me being the failure. But standing there in Uncle Rob's house, surrounded by his photographs and surfboards, I saw how wrong they were. I wasn't incompetent. I'd just never been trusted with anything of real value. And now I had something that truly mattered. I wasn't about to let them rewrite Uncle Rob's trust. I wasn't about to let them take this from me. The next week was a suffocating pressure cooker. They called every other day with new suggestions. My dad sent me links to real estate agents, telling me which ones I should use. Mom dropped by with groceries, pretending to be helpful, but slipping in lines like, "It's such a big place for one person, don't you think?" My brother even called, something he hadn't done in months, saying, "Mom and Dad told me about the house. You know, if you're overwhelmed, I can take it off your hands. I'll even let you stay in the guest room if you want." I left bitterly after that call. He said it like he was doing me a favor. The same brother they bought a new car for while telling me there wasn't enough money to help with my college rent. The same brother who got a loan from them to start a bar that failed within a year, but who they still called ambitious, while I was directionless. The favoritism was so blatant, it hurt. Every time I replayed their words, I felt myself sink deeper into a mix of searing anger and cold determination. Uncle Rob had chosen me. He saw something in me they never bothered to look for. And I wasn't about to let them erase his decision. But the more politely I pushed back, the more aggressive they became. One evening, they showed up again, unannounced. I was on the porch, watching the waves, when their car crunched on the gravel. My dad marched up the steps, a folder stuffed with papers in his hand. "Jake," he said, his voice hard. "We've been patient. We've already filed the transfer. You're out by Friday. This is happening. Don't embarrass yourself fighting it." My mom stood behind him, arms crossed, that satisfied little smirk on her lips, the one she wore whenever she thought she'd won. "It's for your own good, sweetheart," she chimed in. "We're saving you from making a huge mistake." That was the absolute breaking point. They weren't just trying to take the house, they were trying to make me believe I couldn't handle it. The same way they always had. My fists clenched. But instead of yelling, I forced myself to breathe. I opened the screen door, looked them both straight in the eye, and simply said, "We'll see." Then I shut the door. Inside, my heart hammered so hard I could hear it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting. I was planning. They thought they'd already won, that I'd roll over like I always had. But they had no idea. A week before, I'd already moved the house into a trust Uncle Rob's lawyer had helped me set up. They had no idea the deed wasn't even in my name anymore. I leaned against the wall, a small, grim smile playing on my lips as I heard their footsteps retreat down the porch. They thought I was the same old Jake, the kid who never pushed back. They were in for a shock. But the real tension began just 2 days later. The crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. I figured it was just my parents again, back for another round of "we know best." But when I stepped out onto the porch, I froze. They hadn't just come back. They'd brought people with them. 2 sharply dressed men and a woman were walking up the steps behind my parents, clipboards and folders in hand. Real estate agents. Buyers. My dad waved like he was welcoming them to his house. My mom was practically glowing, her arm linked with his, as if this was their victory lap. Jake, my dad boomed, his voice dripping with false cheer. Come out and meet the folks who are going to take great care of this place. I stood there, gripping the wooden railing of the porch so tightly my knuckles went white. Excuse me, my mom said, her tone dripping with smugness. This is the Simmons family. They've been looking for a property just like this. Isn't it wonderful, honey? You won't have to worry about a thing. They'll pay top dollar, and you'll get a nice little sum out of it. Enough for a small condo somewhere more realistic for you. The buyers smiled politely, clearly sensing the icy tension, but my parents carried on as though I wasn't even standing there. My dad opened his folder, pulling out papers, flipping through them with an air of absolute authority. We've got everything ready for closing. Just a few signatures, and this can be wrapped up quickly. It was like being a ghost in my own life. My own parents, standing on my uncle's porch, talking over me, treating me like a bystander in something that was mine. All those years of being pushed aside, dismissed, told I wasn't capable, they all crashed down on me at once. My chest felt tight, my throat burned, but I couldn't let them see me break. The buyers stepped inside with my parents leading the way, acting as if they already owned the place. I followed them into the living room, where Uncle Rob's surfboard still leaned against the wall and his old record player sat in the corner. My mom gestured around the room like she was giving a grand tour. It's such a charming space, isn't it? With just a bit of updating, it'll be perfect for your family gatherings. Her words sliced through me. She was erasing him. Erasing me. From the very place he had left for me. My dad added, and the deck out back, amazing view, perfect for parties. Jake never really uses it, so you'll make better use of it anyway. Something in me finally snapped. I couldn't keep quiet. This isn't your house to sell, I said firmly, my voice louder than I intended. Everyone stopped. My parents turned to me, faces full of annoyance rather than shame. My dad's jaw tightened. Don't be childish, Jake. We already told you. We filed a transfer. This is happening whether you like it or not. My mom shook her head, her expression full of that infuriating pity she always reserved for me. Sweetheart, you'll thank us later. You're not cut out for something like this. We're protecting you from yourself. And that was the true betrayal. Not just that they were trying to sell the house behind my back, but that they were stripping away my choice, my autonomy, the last tangible piece of my uncle I had left. They didn't just want the house. They wanted to remind me I'd never have control, not even over my own life. I forced myself to steady my voice, even as my hands trembled. You're making a mistake. They laughed. Actually laughed. My mom turned back to the buyers. Ignore him. He's just overwhelmed. He'll come around once it's all finalized. I felt my pulse hammering, but beneath the anger, something cold settled in me. A chilling clarity. They thought they'd already won, that I was powerless, that I'd fold like I always had. But they had no idea that while they were busy plotting behind my back, I'd already made sure this house was untouchable. I stayed quiet as they finished their little tour, biting my tongue until I tasted iron. My silence made them smugger, more careless, more certain of their victory. The buyers shook hands with my dad, promising to be in touch. My parents walked them out like proud hosts. And then, just as the car pulled away, my dad turned to me with a smirk I'll never forget. You're up by Friday, Jake. Don't drag this out. It's done. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just gave them that same calm, almost amused smile I'd worn before. Inside, though, my resolve solidified. This wasn't just about standing my ground. It was about finally proving them wrong. They wanted to treat me like the weak one, the irresponsible one. But they had no idea the storm I was about to bring down on them. And in that moment, as they strutted back to their car, I knew the betrayal had gone too far to forgive. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was war. After that day, everything shifted. I couldn't unsee the smugness on their faces, the way my parents paraded strangers through the living room like I was just some squatter they were waiting to evict. The betrayal clung to me like salt in the air, seeping into every thought. For the next week, they doubled down. Calls, texts, unannounced visits. It was relentless. My dad would send me messages with dates and times for showings as though I had no say. My mom would leave voicemails dripping with condescension. Honey, The movers are booked for Friday. Pack your essentials and we'll help with the rest. You'll feel so much lighter once this is behind you. I tried to tune them out, but the pressure seeped into everything. I couldn't even enjoy the beach anymore. The deck, once my place of peace, became a stage where I half expected to see cars pulling in every time I sat down. Their shadow was everywhere, pressing me into a corner. The worst part was the doubts they stirred up. At night, lying in Uncle Rob's old bedroom, I'd hear their words looping in my head. You're not responsible. You've never managed anything this big. You'll thank us later. My chest would tighten and I'd wonder, what if they were right? What if I was clinging to something too big for me? Bills piled on the kitchen counter, utilities, property taxes, things Uncle Rob had handled without me realizing the weight of it. I stared at those numbers, my heart racing. I had some savings, sure, but nowhere near enough to float me for long. Every envelope felt like evidence for their case against me. Then came the lowest blow. One afternoon, I came home from a grocery run to find the locks on the front door had been changed. My keys didn't fit. My groceries slipped out of my arms, crashing onto the porch as I stared in disbelief. A note was taped to the door in my dad's neat handwriting. Jake, this is for your own good. We'll talk soon. I sat on the steps, groceries at my feet, staring at that note until the sun went down. The weight of it all crushed me. For a moment, I thought maybe they'd finally won. Maybe I'd never be strong enough to stand up to them. That night, I slept in my car, parked down by the dunes. The ocean roared in the distance, and I felt like I'd been cast out of my own life. My uncle's house, the one place where I'd ever felt chosen, was locked away from me. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling of the car, something shifted. My parents had always counted on me folding. That was their playbook: pressure, shame, and a reminder of my supposed failures until I caved. But this time, something felt different. They hadn't just taken control. They'd crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I remembered the meeting with Uncle Rob's lawyer, the paperwork we'd signed, the careful words about protecting the property from potential disputes. I thought about the trust, how it wasn't just an idea, but something already in place. My parents thought they'd locked me out, but the truth was, they were the ones standing on sand. With the sound of the waves crashing like a heartbeat, I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't fight them head-on. Not yet. I'd let them think I was beaten. Let them believe they'd stripped me down to nothing. Because the more confident they became, the harder the fall would be. The next morning, I picked up my phone and called Uncle Rob's lawyer. My voice was steady when I said, "It's time." That day marked the bottom of the pit for me. I was shut out, humiliated, stripped of dignity. But underneath the wreckage, a spark had caught fire. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting. I was planning. I'll never forget the expression on Mr. Harlan's face when I walked into his office that morning. He was a sharp, gray-haired man who'd known Uncle Rob for years, and he didn't look surprised to see me. If anything, it was like he'd been expecting this moment. "Jake," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him, "I take it things with your parents are escalating." I sat down, exhaustion weighing heavy on me, but there was a steadiness in my voice I hadn't felt before. "They changed the locks." His brow furrowed. "On a property that legally isn't even in your name anymore." He tapped the file on his desk. "Good thing we moved quickly. The trust has already been filed with the county. They can parade buyers all they like, but they don't have the authority to sell something that doesn't belong to them." The words should have been comforting, but what struck me more was the certainty in his tone. For the first time since this all began, someone was firmly on my side, with actual proof, not just sympathy. Mr. Harlan explained the layers of protection Uncle Rob had insisted on. The house wasn't simply mine. It belonged to the trust, overseen by Mr. Harlan himself as trustee. No single person, not even me, could make rash decisions about selling it. Uncle Rob had thought ahead, as though he knew my parents would try something like this. Walking out of that office, I felt a massive weight lift. My parents thought they had me cornered, but they were standing on thin ice, completely oblivious. For once, I held the real power, and I didn't need to shout to prove it. The days that followed were strangely calm for me, even as my parents ramped up their efforts. They hosted another showing, this time with 3 different sets of buyers. I knew because Mrs. Whitaker, one of the neighbors, texted me, whispering about the crowd on the porch. Instead of panicking, I stayed where I was, at a small cafe in town, sipping coffee while flipping through listings for part-time jobs. I decided that if I wanted to protect this house long-term, I needed stability of my own. No more drifting from one odd job to the next. It wasn't glamorous, but I landed a position working for a local property management company. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was suddenly in the business of maintaining homes, the very thing my parents claimed I couldn't handle. At first, I just did basic admin tasks, but I paid attention, absorbing everything: tenant contracts, repair logistics, tax filings. Every day felt like a small step out of the shadow I'd lived in for so long. With each paycheck, I set aside money. It wasn't much, but it was mine, earned without their interference. And each evening after work, I'd drive back to the beach house. Even if I couldn't go inside yet, I'd park nearby and sit on the sand, staring at the silhouette of the place against the sunset. It reminded me what I was working toward. Meanwhile, the town wasn't blind to what was happening. Uncle Rob had been well-liked, and word spread quickly that his house had been left to me. Mrs. Whitaker, the neighbor, started waving whenever she saw me on the beach. One evening, she came over with a tin of cookies. "Your uncle was proud of you," she said softly, pressing the tin into my hands. "Don't let them take that from you." Her words bolstered me in ways I didn't expect. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about stepping into the kind of man Uncle Rob believed I could be. Over the next month, my footing grew firmer. At work, I gained enough trust that my boss let me oversee a couple of small rental properties on my own. It felt surreal handling lease agreements, scheduling repairs, making decisions, the kind of responsibility my parents always said I'd fumble. And the thing was, I wasn't fumbling. I was thriving. The more I succeeded quietly, the less their voices rattled in my head. Their calls went unanswered. Their notes slipped under the beach house door went unread. Every time they tried to push, I pushed back by doing nothing, because I didn't need to. They were walking deeper into a trap they didn't even realize existed. But then came the turning point, the moment when the quiet rise stopped being subtle. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the call from Mr. Harlan. "Jake," he said, his voice tinged with dry amusement. "Your parents have filed paperwork to finalize a sale. They've scheduled a meeting with the buyers for next week." My heart raced. But this time, not from fear. "So, what happens now?" I asked. "That's where it gets interesting," he replied. "Because next week, we'll be there, too. And they won't be expecting us." For the first time in my life, I felt something new when I thought about my parents. Not dread, not guilt. Power. I wasn't the weak link anymore. I was the storm on the horizon, waiting to break. And as I hung up the phone, a slow smile crept across my face. They thought they were about to win. They had no idea their empire of control was built on sand. The week leading up to that meeting was the longest of my life, but also the most focused I had ever been. For once, I wasn't flailing or just reacting to whatever disaster my parents dropped in my lap. I was preparing. Every day after work, I sat with Mr. Harlan in his office, going over the trust documents line by line. He explained things in his calm, lawyerly way, but beneath the legal jargon was a clear, unshakable truth. My parents had no ground to stand on. Uncle Rob had been deliberate. The trust wasn't just airtight. It was reinforced. The house belonged to the trust with me as the beneficiary, and no outside party could alter or sell it without the trustee's approval. And that trustee wasn't me. It was Mr. Harlan himself. My parents thought I was a soft target, but the truth was Uncle Rob had already built me a fortress. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Mr. Harlan leaned back in his chair and gave me a rare smile. "You know, Jake, your uncle told me something before he passed. He said, you'd need time to find your strength, but once you did, you'd surprise everyone, including yourself." Those words sank deep. For so long, I'd carried around the image my parents had painted of me: unreliable, weak, incapable. But here was proof that someone who knew me, really knew me, believed the opposite. It felt like a torch being passed into my hands. At work, too, things were shifting. My boss, seeing how quickly I was learning, offered me a bigger role, handling client communication for new property owners. It wasn't glamorous, but it meant trust, authority, and the kind of experience that turned into real opportunities. I even started to imagine a future in this field. Something steady, something I could build for myself. The kind of life my parents never pictured for me. Meanwhile, my parents kept calling, leaving increasingly urgent messages. My dad's tone turned sharper. "You're wasting time, Jake. This sale is happening whether you like it or not." My mom switched tactics, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Sweetheart, you're making this so hard on yourself. If you just cooperate, we can all move on." I didn't answer, not once. Instead, I let them think they'd won. I let them pour all their energy into the illusion of control. I wanted them overconfident, certain that I was beaten, so that when the ground disappeared beneath them, the shock would be total. Then, just 3 days before the scheduled meeting, Mr. Harlan showed me something that made my chest tighten with both nerves and exhilaration. The official deed filings, in black and white, stamped and signed. It was the proof that the house had been secured in the trust weeks earlier. My name wasn't even on the deed anymore. It was beyond their reach. "Bring this with you," he said, sliding the folder across the desk. "When the time comes, you won't need to say much. The papers will speak for themselves." I carried that folder home like it was made of gold. Sitting on the beach that night, I opened it again and again, running my fingers over the seal, the signatures, the proof that for the first time, I wasn't powerless. But I also knew this wasn't just about legality. This was about history. Decades of being overlooked, pushed aside, and belittled. This meeting wasn't just going to end their scheme. It was going to end the story they'd been telling about me my whole life. The night before, I stood outside the locked beach house, staring up at the windows glowing in the moonlight. It hurt knowing my parents were inside, probably congratulating themselves on their victory. But instead of bitterness, I felt a strange calm. They didn't know that tomorrow everything would change. For the first time, I wasn't scared of them. I was ready. The morning of the meeting, I woke up before dawn. My hands should have been shaking, but instead there was a strange calm in me, like the nerves had burned themselves out, leaving only pure resolve. I dressed simply, button-down shirt and slacks, nothing flashy. I didn't want to look like I was trying to prove something. I wanted to look like what I was, prepared. Mr. Harlan met me outside the county offices, carrying his briefcase like it was an extension of himself. He gave me a nod, the kind that said everything without words. "We're ready." When we walked into the conference room, my parents were already there, sitting side by side with a real estate agent and 2 buyers. My mom's face lit up with smug delight the moment she saw me. My dad leaned back in his chair, arms folded like a king waiting for his subject to beg. "Jake," he said smoothly. "Glad you could make it. We're finalizing everything today. You'll sign, collect your share, and this nonsense will finally be over." I didn't sit right away. Instead, I set the folder on the table and slid into the chair across from them. Mr. Harlan sat beside me, expression unreadable, but his quiet, confident presence was enough to make my mom's smile falter just slightly. The real estate agent cleared her throat, clearly eager to move forward. "So, Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell have assured us they are the rightful owners, and all we need today are signatures to proceed." Mr. Harlan leaned forward, his voice calm, but cutting. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. The Caldwells," he nodded toward my parents, "are not, nor have they ever been, the rightful owners of this property." The room went still. My dad's smirk completely vanished. "What are you talking about? We filed the transfer weeks ago. This is our house now." That's when Mr. Harlan opened his briefcase, pulling out the documents with deliberate slowness. He laid them on the table one by one until the trust papers and deeds sat in plain view. The property in question was placed into an irrevocable trust prior to any such attempts. As trustee, I can confirm that the Caldwells have no legal authority to sell, transfer, or otherwise tamper with it. The sole beneficiary is Jake Caldwell. I watched my parents' faces drain of color as the words settled in. My mom blinked rapidly, her lips parting like she wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. My dad leaned forward, grabbing at the papers, only for Mr. Harlan to slide them just out of reach. "This is ridiculous," my dad snapped, his voice cracking. We talked to the county clerk. We filed the paperwork." Mr. Harlan's calm never wavered. "You filed forged paperwork, which I should remind you is a felony. And given that the house was never legally in your possession to begin with, your efforts are meaningless. The trust overrides everything." The buyers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them cleared his throat. "So, you mean the sale isn't valid?" "Correct," Mr. Harlan said. "There is no sale. There never was." I finally spoke, my voice steady, even though inside I felt like I was standing on a cliff edge. "You tried to lock me out of the house. You told me I was out by Friday. You paraded strangers through a home that wasn't yours to sell. And the whole time, you thought I'd just roll over like always." I looked at them, really looked at them. And for once, I didn't feel small under their gaze. "But Uncle Rob didn't leave the house to you. He left it to me because he knew I'd take care of it. And I did what you never expected. I protected it." My mom's face crumpled somewhere between anger and raw panic. "Jake, you don't understand. We were just trying to help. You would have ruined it, like you always ruin everything." That line, the same refrain they'd used all my life, didn't sting this time. It almost made me laugh. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch, then said quietly, "We'll see who ruined what." The buyers stood, muttering apologies about wasted time, and quickly left the room. The real estate agent followed, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. And then it was just us, the four of us, and the truth, stark and undeniable, spread out on the table. My dad's voice was low, shaking with fury. "You think you've won, but you're still nothing without us." Mr. Harlan closed the folder with a sharp snap. "On the contrary, Mr. Caldwell. What I see here is a young man standing on his own 2 feet while the two of you scramble in the dirt. If you pursue this further, you'll only dig your hole deeper. My advice? Walk away." I didn't need to say another word. My silence, my calm, was enough. For the first time, I had the control, and they knew it. But this wasn't the end. Because the fallout of that meeting was about to shake everything. The silence in that room stretched like a taut rope. My mom's eyes darted between me and Mr. Harlan, desperate for a foothold, while my dad's jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. For the first time in my life, I saw it. The moment they realized they'd lost. Not just the house, not just the scheme, but me. Mr. Harlan stood and gathered the papers back into his briefcase with deliberate care. "I'll be filing a formal notice with the court regarding the attempted forgery. If you're wise, you'll leave this matter alone. Any further interference will only make things worse for you." His words landed like gavel strikes. My mom finally snapped, her voice shrill. "Jake, how could you do this to us? We're your parents. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." I met her gaze and for once, didn't look away. "Everything you've done for me?" My voice stayed calm, steady. "You took my savings to cover my brother's failures. You dismissed every choice I ever made because it wasn't what you wanted. You tried to steal the one thing my uncle entrusted to me. That isn't love. That isn't support. That's control. And I'm done with it." Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. My dad slammed his fist on the table, trying to reclaim some authority. "You'll regret this, Jake. You think you can cut us out? You're nothing without family." I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table, my voice low but clear. "I already have a family. Uncle Rob was my family. The neighbors who look out for me, they're my family. The people who believe in me are my family. And you." I shook my head slowly. "You're just strangers who share my last name." The color drained from his face. We walked out of that room, leaving them sitting in stunned silence. Mr. Harlan patted my shoulder as we stepped into the sunlight. "Your uncle would be proud," he said simply. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread quickly. Word of what they tried to do reached the neighbors, the community, even a few of their friends. Whispers of fraud and betrayal clung to them wherever they went. My dad's reputation at work, where he prided himself on being seen as trustworthy, took a hit he couldn't repair. My mom, who thrived on social circles and appearances, found herself quietly uninvited from gatherings she used to host. They tried calling me, of course, at first with fury, then with guilt, and finally with silence. I never answered. Meanwhile, life moved forward. I worked harder at my job, saved steadily, and little by little, I made the beach house my own again. I changed the locks, not out of spite, but because I was finally the one choosing who belonged inside. I planted flowers out front, repainted the deck, and every evening, I'd sit there as the sun set, the same way I used to with Uncle Rob. But now, I wasn't just the kid who needed someone else to believe in him. I was the man who had finally learned to believe in himself. One evening, as the waves crashed and the sky turned gold, I whispered into the salt air, "I kept it safe, Uncle, just like you knew I would." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a shadow in someone else's story. I felt like the author of my own. The house was mine. My life was mine. And my parents? Well, they were just ghosts fading in the rearview mirror.